Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with How I Discovered Shostakovich, because you asked me. So I thought I'd tell you it. Actually, it's kind of a fun story. I discovered Shostakovich because I like band music. I really like band music. When I was a kid, there was this thing in Bridgeport. I'm from Milford, Connecticut, and Bridgeport next door had something called the Barnum Festival, named after P.T. Barnum, as in Barnum and Bailey Circuses, who was a major citizen of Bridgeport. And the Barnum Festival is this sort of celebration of the area, and it always culminated in a band competition, sort of a band festival. One of the bands that participated was from Milford. They were called the Shoreliners. And it was very exciting. I got to march with them once when I was a Cub Scout. It was really they were the local team, and we would go to the Barnum Festival and watch the bands play. And it had nothing to do with Shostakovich, but I just enjoyed bands. And the other place that you found bands and where I really looked forward to hearing them was at halftime during football games. And what many classical music lovers may not know is that the good old US of A has, without question, the greatest tradition of band playing in the Western world, or the world generally, and especially at these large state colleges where they have these enormous marching bands. I mean, the Ohio State Marching Band is probably the most famous of them all, but they are extraordinary musical ensembles. They can do anything, and they do it all while they're marching in formation and putting on shows. It's one of the greatest things in the world, and I've talked about this before. If you haven't had the opportunity, go to YouTube and enter Script Ohio, Script Ohio, and just watch them go. It's just extraordinary. And the African American colleges had their own version of these dance bands that do these production numbers, things that they're extraordinarily gifted. And they can play anything, and they do. And a lot of stuff gets transcribed for band. And one of the things that got transcribed for band, now I'm getting to the point, was the finale of Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, which I'm sure a lot of you played. I played in bands when I was in college. I was always in my college band when I was at Johns Hopkins. I played at all the lacrosse games and whatnot. It's just more fun than, I just loved every minute of it. And I love the transcriptions. I mean, they're really, really fun. I mean, Siegfried's Funeral March sounds much better in the band version. I'm serious. It really does. Anyway, so I'm watching a football game with my dad, and I know exactly where we were. We were at my grandmother's house, my grandmother and grandfather's house in Delaware, my mother's parents' house in Wilmington, which is actually where I was born and where I'm originally from and where my mother's family is from. So we're in Wilmington, and at halftime, they did Shostakovich's Fifth, the finale. Of course, it was the 3-minute abridged band arrangement version of the finale of Shostakovich's Fifth. I mean, you had to sort of leave out that whole quiet, probing, disturbing middle section. But, what the hell? It was the pounding timpani and the big tune that got me, the populist band aspect of it. And so, even at that age, it was about, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. I mean, I was still heavily into classical music, and I had some money that my grandparents had given me. My grandmother gave me. It was around my birthday. It was like in August or something. So I had some money, and I wanted to go buy some records, and I wanted the Shostakovich Fifth. And there was a record store in Wilmington, as there was in every town in those days. And we went there, and they had Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony with Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra, his second recording, the one on RCA. And so I got it, and I trucked it home, and Grandma had a decent stereo in her living room, and I plonked it on, and it didn't sound anything like the finale until you got to the finale. It's actually, as you know, a deeply disturbing and tragic symphony for the most part, especially that central largo. Oh my God. But I put it on, and I was really pretty much captivated by it. See, I also got in the same pile Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony with Pierre Monteux and the Boston Symphony. That was also on RCA. I think RCA was the only label that record store carried. But, it was Russian, and I figured, Russian, it's going to sound like Tchaikovsky. Well, not exactly. It was a little bit more modern than that, but I had no trouble assimilating it, and I was immediately hooked on Shostakovich's Fifth, and not just because of the finale. On the other hand, on the other hand, I stuck with Shostakovich's Fifth for a very long time. That was the only thing I knew by him. And so I got other recordings of the Fifth. I got Bernstein's Columbia one. I got Andre Previn's LSO one on RCA. I had a bunch of Shostakovich's Fifths, but nothing else for quite a few years, as I sort of assimilated that one. And that's, I think, a lesson that some of you ought to take to heart, which is you don't have to rush. You don't have to go and buy, you wrote, 15 symphonies. You don't have to have them all at once. It isn't necessary. You should take your time, let it soak in. Don't make it's a marathon, not a sprint. This business of listening to classical music. And so you should just take a deep breath and let it happen naturally. So I really, really enjoyed the Fifth. And at some point, I felt I was ready for more. And in the 70s, there was a 3-disc RCA set by Ormandy in Philadelphia, who was kind of my go-to Shostakovich guy, of symphonies 13, 14, and 15. Well, if you like the Fifth, starting with Bobby Yar next, and then the 14th, 11 poems about death with Phyllis Curtin and Simon Estes. I mean, I knew Phyllis Curtin because I knew her daughter. We went to high school together. And so I knew her, and she came to my high school and always did master classes. So that was sort of an entree there. But to go from the Fifth to 13, 14, and 15 was quite a change. It really was. And I began to realize that Shostakovich was a composer of let's say just depth, that he was challenging, that his music was deeply, deeply tragic and spooky. And I was fascinated by it. I mean, some people I understand could be put off. I get it. But I thought it was marvelous. And I loved 13, 14, and 15. But they were really different. And I was really glad when I heard them that I had taken the time to really get to know the Fifth well, to get to know the sounds of the music, those spare textures as well, not just the pounding timpani and the bombast, but also, that the bittersweet lyricism, the desolation, the sardonicism of the scherzos. I mean, all of those elements took time, to assimilate them, for me to assimilate, in Shostakovich's own personal language. So then when I heard those later pieces, I knew who I was listening to, and I knew what I was listening to. The fact that 13 and 14 are vocal, of course, helped, because I had a text I could follow and hear how the words and the music fit together. Then the 15th with its, really spacey elements and quotations from Wagner and the William Tell Overture and all that. Well, that was a whole different world. And its tick-tock timeless ending, staring off into eternity. All of that really turned me on to Shostakovich. But it was the Fifth that got me started in the band version, which just goes to show that you never know where you're going to find it. And we should not look down or sneer at arrangements or things that popularize the music because you don't know what's going to hit you. And you don't know where you're going to find it or experience it, or how it's going to enter your life. The important thing, as always, is simply to keep on listening, to take it as it comes, and to have an avenue to further your own explorations of the music. And now, of course, with YouTube and all this stuff, it's so much easier than it used to be. I mean, I had no idea who Shostakovich was. I didn't know what to make of it. All I knew was that it was halftime at the football game. I don't remember which football game. It was a college game. That much I know. And, thank God for the band tradition, because I've heard so much great music thanks to band arrangements, and played in an absolutely superb way in, an environment that is a stadium, or on television as a stadium, where you might not think that the music would be at its best, but it is. It really is. And there's one last lesson that I think we can take from this, which is that people treat classical music often as though it's something terribly fragile, as though, everything has to be just right or just perfect, or it isn't going to work. The truth of the matter is these pieces endure because they are hardy. They're like weeds. They're durable. Yes, I talk about bad performances. I trash bad performances. I scream and yell and carry on. But the fact of the matter is that the music the music makes its impression almost no matter what you do with it. You could play it upside down, sideways, underwater for kazoo choir, which has been done by the Temple University Kazoo Choir. I didn't hear them do Shostakovich, but I heard them do Also Sprach Zarathustra. So, you can do almost anything, but the music endures. It comes across. Its essential communicativeness is very, very hard to kill. And I'm not suggesting that the band arrangements were in any way, not respectful or dismissive of the music. They were wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. And I recommend it to all of you. Get it however you get it. So keep on listening, friends, and thanks so much for joining me. How did you get Shostakovich? Tell me, and take care.